Good evening and welcome to Chatbox with Sam. Tonight's guest is author and former wrestler Bill Kilpack. Good evening, Bill. How are you?
I'm doing all right. I'm
Good.
excited to be here.
Thank you very much. It's an honour to have you on my show. If you were to encourage the younger generation, what would be the main focus?
Well, basically, work hard and that things aren't perfect. Things uh, don't go right most of the time. And the thing with that is that if you want to make it work, then you got to put in the work.
Right.
And that, teaching college, I have noticed a change in recent years. So that's one of the things uh, that's a good piece of advice, I think.
I think so. Absolutely. So, what inspired you into this career of being an author?
Well, I've always told stories ever since I was a little kid. And before I could write, then I would draw them. And so I would draw pictures of spaceships and have battles and things that get blown up, and I'd erase them out and that sort of thing. So I've blown up the USS Enterprise 10,000 times probably. And, uh, so I've always told stories. And then when I was 9, I wrote a poem that I had my teacher, without my knowledge, she entered into a contest and it took first and got published. So that was my first publication credit.
Right.
Yeah.
I did read that, and so it was the first publication from a teacher, which is awesome.
Yeah.
I actually wrote a poem about clouds, and my teacher put it on the wall, and that's the first time I'd been recognised as being able to write things down from my soul. So she made us lay out on the grass outside, and we had to look up and just write what we felt, and that's what I wrote. So that's awesome that teachers can be so inspiring um, in our lives. So and you carried that forward and give you the inspiration to move forward. So could you talk a little bit about the last three books that you've wrote, Crown Prince, Order of Light, and then you've got Demon Seed being published?
Yeah, it's actually an 8-book series. The first two are out. So, we've got Crown Prince, which is pretty exciting. That's book one.
Mhm. Mhm.
And it has won a Firebird Book Award. Online book club, it was runner up for Sci-Fi Fantasy Book of the Year last year. And so that's pretty cool. And Order of Light is book two. And it carries on the story. And then Demon Seed will be coming out any day now.
Mhm.
This is my publisher's proof. That's why it's got the little bar across the front,
Yes.
because I can't get a real one yet, but it's coming out any day. And it carries on the New Blood saga. And with the New Blood saga, the main character's name is Nathar.
Mm.
And his that character, I've always wanted to write a character that uh, was sort of inspired by Socrates. That when I was in college,
Really?
one of my undergrad majors was in philosophy,
Yes.
and Socrates always fascinated me because he would go into a trance-like state and come out with some epiphany, and it he called it being seized by the demon of philosophy.
Mm.
And so Nathar is seized by the demon of sight. And so he sees things in the future, he sees things in the past,
Yeah.
he can touch things and sometimes see the history of that object or that person. And so that's where the idea for the main character came, was this idea that I've had rolling around in my brain for quite a while. I don't know if I should
Oh,
date myself.
amazing. And where can we purchase these books of yours, Bill?
um, they're on Amazon. What I typically tell people is go to my website, kilpack.net, and there's
Mhm.
links right there. You can get them on Amazon. You can get them on for the Nook, for Barnes and Noble Nook. You can get them on Kobo, and they're just right there on the main page. And that is probably the easiest way because the links are all just right there together.
Right. Well, that sounds amazing. I love Greek mythology myself. So, you know, the Medusa, and actually, my dog is called Zeus.
Yeah, I when I was in elementary school, I read every book on mythology that the school library had.
Did you? You were an avid reader. That's
Yeah,
why you're very intelligent. Readers, avid readers, um, they absorb, and their imagination goes above and beyond to be able to write. And it's very time consuming, I'm sure, being able to write. And I read that you had a very difficult time making eye contact with people when you were at a young age. And not so much
yeah,
now.
yeah.
Is it,
Well,
is it easier through Zoom?
well, it is that the very first interview I did on Zoom was not great, and part of it was that I can see myself, and
Yeah,
that when I was acting was part of the problems. That a lot of times with screen tests, I would see my face right there, and it would freak me out. And so, got to a lot of screen tests, didn't get a lot of acting, but uh,
oh,
so yeah, I had one director that was so mad at me that he dragged me into the other room and made me watch the tape, and I was pretty embarrassed.
oh, I'm
But
so
it,
sorry. You're just
uh,
shy.
well, I don't know. It's something. It might be related to the eye contact thing. I don't know why, but when I was a kid, I just couldn't look people in the eye. I joke about it and say that I don't know if I thought they were going to steal my soul, but whatever it was, I couldn't look people in the eye.
Right.
And so, and that lasted until college. And then in college, I just decided that this wasn't going to be a problem for me anymore. And so I worked at a parking lot at the biggest mall in Utah. And so all these people would come through my booth. And so I just made very direct, intense eye contact with every person that came through. And
Yeah.
they probably thought I was that crazy guy like the old vampire movies with the light shining on their eye. Yeah.
But it's like that fear about horse riding and stuff like that. You learned how to overcome it. And I was so
Mhm.
shy when I was young that if more than one person looked at me at the same time, I would run out the room. So I was very shy too. You know, it was
Well,
it's just certain things. Some kids are very very comfortable, but yeah, if I was on stage as well as a child and I threw up. Everyone was looking at me at the same time. I said, "You got me in the wrong thing," to the teacher. You know. So I've overcome that because obviously no one thinks I'm shy now. I could never be accused of being as such. But I just think it's certain things, and then with your philosophy and you teach children yourself, you know. So um, I'm sure you can identify with many different kids and teaching them. Would you like to share a little bit about that, about your teaching?
well, the talking about looking people in the eye, it's funny, it's ironic, I guess, that I ended up teaching college public speaking for 25 years.
Hmm.
And so, that's one end of the spectrum that I went from, from here to here in terms of eye contact. And that's one of those things that if I do have students that have the same issue, then I can address that because that was a chronic issue for me. And so that has been one thing there. I had, uh, well, would you like to hear about my biggest success story?
I do. You're wrestling.
It was a public speaking teaching success story
Sorry.
that
Yeah. Okay.
that we can talk about the wrestling too. Uh, but I had a student who I've had lots of students say that they're phobic about public speaking, and most of them it's just not true. And if they're actually phobic about it, everyone who has ever met them knows. And so I had a student who was in his maybe mid 30s, and he was absolutely phobic, and a lot of his manifestations of anxiety were the opposite. So he would speak very slowly, and
Oh.
and rather than the speed talking that everybody did, and he had a lot of things that he did that were just really uh, bizarre, really. And then eventually he started doing the things that I suggested, and his speaking went from here to here.
Yeah.
And he ended up doing really well in the class. And so at the end of the term, he asked me, what can he do to maintain the skills he had developed? And I suggested Toastmasters. So I don't hear from him. And then I see him at the mall 2 or 3 years later. And he sees me. And when he was my student, he was a construction worker. And then when I see him at the mall, he's in a coat and tie, and he looks happy and healthier and all that. And he just sees me and he does a beeline across the mall. And he comes over to talk to me and told me that my class changed his life.
Oh.
And I was like, well, okay. And he says, no, really, I finally realized that what you were teaching was how you present yourself. And so when that finally clicked, then he said, I got out of construction, I got a professional position, I got promoted into management, I met my wife, now I've got kids. And he says, I owe it all to you. And
Oh.
even though it had been a couple or 3 years, I remembered the Toastmasters thing, and I asked him, did you ever do that? And he gets this big grin and says, I'm the president of the local chapter. And
That's good.
that's about as cool a compliment as I can
It
imagine.
is.
And
That is amazing. Oh, you were an inspiration to him. You helped him overcome his fear or phobia. So that's congratulations to you for doing that. And I'm sure you just did it because you could identify with him, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, because a lot of his manifestations were different, then it took a little while. But yeah, once it clicked, it was really something to see, and just having him make that extra effort to want to come and talk to me. And it was just, it was just by chance that we saw each other, but it was pretty cool. I have to say.
Yes, and are you writing? Is anyone interested in turning some of your books into a script in the future, do you think?
Um, well, not yet. That I think that's probably like every writer's dream, is to have somebody say, I want to make a movie out of this.
Yeah.
And that hasn't happened yet. Although I have been doing a little bit of script writing with Safe Harbor Films, and we're working on a series, a science fiction series that we hope will be a couple seasons on Netflix, and it's called Seven Seas. And
Nice.
so that's one of the things I'm working on there, and that's pretty exciting.
Mm-hmm.
And
Are we allowed to discuss it? Is it under contract? Just wondering.
well, I've received permission to say that much.
Okay. Just
But
making
yes,
sure.
there's a lot of things like that. It's a science fiction project, and um, and then a couple others that are in the shoot, that some possible things with a movie and another, a trilogy of movies and another series. Also with Safe Harbor Films that are, kind of in line.
Hmm. So so when you finish this series of books, will you be staying with the Greek mythology concept, or do you think you'll be moving into another area of writings?
Well, the Greek mythology has got an influence on a lot of things that I do. That I do a lot of research for the fantasy novels I write,
Mm-hmm.
and one of the things that, like with the New Blood saga, you may not know it, but the foundational culture that I built this world off of is based in Celtic mythology and Celtic culture.
Oh.
And then there's another series that I'm working on where the foundational culture is Viking culture. And they're not Vikings, but the bottom layer of the
Right.
world that I'm building there. And so those are a couple fantasy series that I'm working on.
Mm.
I actually have about 25 books that are at various levels of completion. Another one that's coming out this month is a novella. It's called Paleface,
Yes.
and this is my uh, proof there, and it got honorable mention in L. Ron Hubbard's Writers of the Future, and that should be coming out this month also. And with it, the main character is a Navajo named Hector Whitehorse, and basically he has a what I call kind of a planetary traffic accident. And the last chapter took place a couple weeks ago. That's the date in the book.
Oh, awesome.
So, yeah, so I updated it with for COVID and stuff.
Have you ever thought about going to the Comic Cons?
Yes, that I went to this past, I think it was September, I went to FanX. And when I decided to do that, it was too late to get a booth, but I went and printed some
Cards.
yeah, the
Oh,
bookmarks.
bookmarks. Yes.
Yep. And I handed those out like business cards.
Yeah.
And it was actually a lot of fun. I got to meet one of my favorite authors there. And I didn't realize it, but I kind of snubbed a big name to do it. I didn't recognize him because the big name because his hair turned white.
Mm-hmm.
But I asked him if this other guy was there. And afterwards, I realized who I'd been talking to, and I was like, "Oh, that's horrible."
Oh, I
But
know. I'm terrible with names. And you also in your career was a wrestler. You got the AAU Grand National Championship for wrestling.
yeah, that at that time there was only one national championship, and so it used to mean a lot more. Now there's about 20, and
Right.
so one of my sons is like a 17-time national champ, and
Oh.
I won it once, and I was in the finals 9 times, but I won it once, and I made the Pan Am team in Greco-Roman, and I didn't get to go because of an injury, but I made the team, and so I was performing at a pretty high level for a while there.
Right. Well, you did say when we had this discussion the other day that people retire early because it's such a hard on the body sport, because
Mhm.
your whole body's being slammed around. So, what's your experience with that? And then you were mentioning that 30 is actually an old age to be into wrestling.
Well, yeah, that at the time, uh, the group of guys that I was competing with, we were all on that track, that Olympic track. And when at the time was when Dave Schultz had just gotten a gold medal in the Olympics, and he was 30, and that was so old. We would sit around and watch him, and I know, and we'd be sitting there going, "How's he still doing this?
Right.
How can he do this? How can he still be putting up with the pounding?" And at that time, the average age for international competition was 19.
Yeah.
And now it's 28. And I think that's because they are so much better at physical therapy than they used to be.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. So, do you miss that?
Um, Sometimes I dream sometimes about going back. My left knee ended my career.
Hmm.
Um, and so I have dreams sometimes about going back and competing again and just being I know I'd wrestle a lot smarter now.
Yeah.
And and with coaching, I've been coaching for more than 20 years, and I can still wrestle with the kids and pretty much any age, any size. I can still wrestle with them fine. It's just it takes me weeks afterwards to recover because my body's just not it's not what it used to be.
No, that happens with age and, as we're getting older. So how has music influenced your life?
Well, music is really a huge part of my life. That I've always been into music since I was a kid,
Hmm.
and uh, they they talk about things that are called social dramas, where it's something that happens and you can remember where you were and what you were doing and all that, that has this really serious impact. And it tends to be something that traumatizes a society if it's a social drama.
Right.
So the death of Elvis was that for me. And I was, 6 years old. And so, music has always been important. And when I was in fourth grade, I had some friends that we decided that we were just going to pretend to be the Beatles for a year. And so we would let us sometimes stay inside for recess and listen to Beatles music. And we all had roles. I was Paul. And then she would sometimes play the piano and we would sing these Beatles songs. And it just so happened that year was when John Lennon was shot. Mm-hmm. And so that's another one of those moments that I remember what I was doing and all that. But I love music. It's a huge part of my life. I always have music playing.
Well, music does hold memories, and specifically laughter and music can change a room when there's an atmosphere, and both of them are very important in humanity, both of them. Oh, yeah. And that's why I bring the music up, because if we've got nothing in common to say, you'll play a song and everyone is united,
Yeah, I used to have long hair and all that.
Me too.
Yeah. When it was at its longest, I could tip my head back and it would touch my belt.
Really? Mm-hmm. Wow. Suddenly I'm thinking of the guy in Highlander.
Oh, that's one of my favorite movies of all time.
Yes, it is. Yeah. It is one. It is a good. There can only be one.
Yep.
So, what out of all the charities to choose from, which one would you choose to advocate for, and why?
Wow, that's a good question. A nonprofit organization that is really close to my heart is DMLA and the International Order of DMLA, and it's sponsored by the Masons. And although I got out of trouble as a teenager on my own, if I hadn't been in DMLA, who knows if I'd have gone back to getting in trouble.
You mean Freemasons?
The Masons sponsor DMLA, yes. And I'm a Master Mason. But in DMLA, which is the youth organization they sponsor, I went through to being a state master counselor, which is like president of the state. And I went to International Congress and served on some committees there. I was pretty heavily involved. And that would probably be the charity that I would, the nonprofit organization that I would want to throw some weight behind, at least initially. It's named after Jacques de Molay, who was the last Grand Master of the Templar Knights. So my grandpa was a Mason, and I didn't know anything about it. And then when I got into de Molay, all of a sudden I'm seeing these things like the square and compass that was printed on his hat and on his ring and all this, that I started seeing it and going, wait a minute, I've seen this before. And so when I got my entered apprentice degree, then my grandpa got to go and watch it. And that was pretty cool. And it was on his birthday. So that was pretty special to get that. But he's passed away now, but that was an exciting thing. But that was a big deal. And DMLA is another one of those places where I really learned public speaking.
How do you feel about what has transpired since COVID-19?
Well, COVID that's just scary stuff. That being in Utah, I didn't see as much as other places. I know one person who died from it. She was one of my students, and that affected me a lot, actually. And so I haven't been coaching wrestling since the first lockdown, because if that happened to one of my wrestlers, I don't know what I would do. Right. I don't know how, or one of my wrestlers' family members, and it's impossible to control that in a sport like wrestling.
Right.
So that's one impact. I think that one thing it's going to affect is the way that we do business. that Zoom meetings and that sort of thing, it
Mm.
was already there. But for me, it didn't affect me personally very much because I just started teaching on Zoom.
Mm.
And I actually like it. I think there's a lot of people who don't participate in classroom discussion,
Right.
but they did on Zoom.
Mm.
They would either chat or they would talk with their camera off. Whereas if it was a face to face class, I think they wouldn't say anything at all. But I think that it will have a lot of, uh, I think it's proven that a lot of people can do their jobs and work from home.
Right.
I think
Yeah.
that will be uh, one of the big impacts. Um, that I think that, well, I think that a lot of people are stuff with the complaining about masks and things like that. I think that it's just a lot of people just don't want to be told what to do.
Right.
And I think it really just kind of comes down to that because, the mask isn't to protect you, it's to protect others from you.
Mm.
If you're asymptomatic and
Right.
carrying it and stuff. Uh, but when that lockdown happened, the first lockdown, it was, I was living science fiction.
Mm.
It was the kind of thing I saw movies
Right.
and then
It was
right
kind of
around that,
strange.
oh yeah,
Mm.
right around that time I watched the first of the new Planet of the Apes movies again,
Mm.
and seeing that in the context of that the lockdown just happened, it was haunting.
Right.
And, but I think that's that. I think those are a couple of things that are really going to have an impact.
So, do you have any hobbies apart from the wrestling? I know you did. Do you have any other hobbies that you like to do with you, like with playing games with your family or son and changing the rules?
Well, I love role playing games, and so all of my kids, we played Dungeons and Dragons together. We played Marvel superheroes together. I've got a lot of role playing games. I've got a cabinet full of role playing games, and my youngest son and I have, with advanced D&D in their first and second editions, we have rewritten some of the rules, that we've kind of blended them together, and then also uh, made some changes. They're just things that we think make sense,
Mm-hmm.
and other kind of in-house rules that we play, just that we've developed over time. And when I was going through a divorce, then that was one of those things that was helpful in terms of just having something to do with my kids that was
Right.
interactive. At first, I was taking them to movies, but that's not real interactive. It might be
Yeah.
fun, but it's not interactive. And then playing role playing games really was that all it is interaction.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's one thing that we do a lot of.
It's quality
Uh,
time together, which is good.
mhm. Yeah, and I also love to cook,
Mm-hmm.
and I have cooked just about anything you can imagine on the grill, and bread, fruit, vegetables, whatever it is. I've probably cooked it on a grill. Um, I got a smoker that I've had some good success with. Um, but I love to cook. I do all the cooking in my house.
Do you?
Yeah,
Me too.
yeah, and I think I'm a decent cook. And there's a
Yeah.
few things I've actually considered doing a cookbook, eventually, because I've got a lot of recipes that I've made up.
You should do that.
Yeah.
Well, Bill, that was, if there's anything that you'd like to share with your viewers that you'd like to tell them before we say goodnight.
Um, well, as far as my novels go, that if you like good epic fantasy, that I call what I do realistic epic fantasy. And so the people have real life concerns. They have and the magic is more subtle. So there are some fantasy novels and series out there where the magic is such a big deal, it's like fireworks,
Mm.
and it can distract from the story. And that is not what I do. That for me, it's much more practical, and it's much more subdued. Where if something happens in some stories, there's this it might, maybe there's a huge flash of light and smoke and whatever it might be. And my stuff, it just happens. It's just, and it happened.
Hmm.
And so that's one thing that I do like, and that the people are real, and they have insecurities, and they have issues that they're dealing with. They have, uh, some real life things that I've experienced myself, or watched people experience. And for example, Nathar has a bad knee,
Mm-hmm.
and so that's one of those things. This is really patting myself on the. I'm not going to go there. I'm not
Go
going to
on,
go
do
pat
it.
myself.
Do it. Come
The
on.
two things that Okay, there's two things I'll say. One is when I tell people I've written fantasy novels, I get one of two responses. One is I get, oh, like Harry Potter, and the other
No.
is, oh, like Game of Thrones, and it's about 50-50.
Really?
My stuff is like Game of Thrones.
Okay.
So there it's
Well, that's
there's
going to be
stuff that,
very popular because people love that show.
oh, I
The
love
adults.
the,
Yeah.
oh yeah, I love the show, and I've been reading the books for years. And so it's more like that. And I've had people say that my stuff is like a blend of Lord of the Rings and Game of Thrones as far as style,
Okay.
and that to me is a huge compliment.
Mm-hmm.
And I've heard it a few times, and that's,
Well,
you can
that's
say that as
good.
much as you want.
And
And
you're on social media.
yep, and you can find me on Instagram, WD Kilpack the third, and the third is III. Kilpack is with one L. My website, of course, is kilpack.net. And that's kind of the communication hub for my dreams.
Thank you so much, Bill, for coming on Chatbox with Sam. I really did enjoy talking to you. I know you're an amazing, intelligent gent. The philosophy alone, there's a lot to learn from that. So, um, maybe you'll write a book one day on philosophy and your thoughts regarding such like Carl Jung and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you very much, Bill, and it's been an honour and a pleasure.
Well, thanks for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. Good night.